read some cool books in the first half of 2024. Greetings, my name is Nina, welcome back to my channel. And so, June 2024 is coming to an end, and it means that half of 2024 is over. Yeah, it was quite fast. Throughout these nearly 6 months, I read some cool books. And in this video, I'm going to show you some of the best books that I read so far this year. This video is also going to include short stories, yes, because there are some short stories. They deserve a separate category, and also a few honorable mentions. And so, let's get started. And so here are the books, and the very first one over here is A Clockwork Orange by Anthony Burgess. I did not expect this book to impress me so much. My edition of this book says, can you save the world by taking people's free will away from them? And this is a very immortal question. However, to me, this book is about answering to violence with more violence. I think this book is more about that because like the annotation says, this main character, Alex, who likes to do violence, ends up in a government program that uses violence on him. This book is definitely more about can you use violence to fight violence. And I think it's done very well. However, be careful because author uses a specific language over here, and I think it should have been better for me to read it in original English because of this. However, I think that the English version would have slowed down my reading, but the Russian version I read quite fast. In case you don't know, the author took some random Russian words and added them to the book, and over here, these some random words, they are written not in Cyrillic, well, that's the Russian alphabet, but in Latin. Odd choice of words in my opinion, however, it makes the book memorable. But the story itself impressed me, and that's what matters here. So yeah, definitely something I will read again, because this book is really solid and there's a lot to think about over here. Okay, the next comes the first book that I read in 2024. Loved it instantly. I've spoken a lot about this book. It's a solid fantasy novel. The Last Unicorn by Peter S. Beagle. You haven't read The Last Unicorn? Think that fantasy isn't that great, or that classic fantasy is too slow and boring? Pick up this book. I have talked a lot about this book on my channel. I should make a separate video on the book. I will not say anything else. I just wanna add that at the moment of reading, I did not think that this book has a film adaptation, or to be exact, animated film adaptation. But now I realize that, and I think I should watch it. I definitely will. Okay, next comes two books by the same author. I read this one first. So this is Radio Silence by Alice Oseman. This is a book about a girl named Frances called A Study Machine, for she studies a lot. And one day she meets this guy named Aled, and like the book says, she is unafraid to be herself. But then there are lots of challenges on their way, and soon Frances has to decide whether she should be who society wants her to be or who she herself wants to be. I did not expect to read this book in one day. Yeah, definitely this is the first book in English that I read entirely in only one day. This is a 400-page book and I read it in one day. I just couldn't put the book down. I definitely recommend you. It's a very easy, light-hearted read, and there is a lot to think about here. Just like Beneath the Wheel by Hermann Hesse, one of my favorite books, this Radio Silence addresses how studying too much affects children. And the next best book of 2024 so far is also by Alice Oseman. I found out about this book right after I finished Radio Silence, because this edition also has some additional information on other Alice Oseman books. And this book had a very great annotation, and I knew instantly I wanted to read this book, so I found it in Italy and loved it. And this is I Was Born for This. So in this book we have two protagonists, Angel and Jimmy. Angel is a huge fan of a pop rock band called The Ark, and Jimmy is the frontman of The Ark. And one day their paths collide. Can't really say that I related to this book because, well, first of all, I'm not a fan of pop rock bands, and second, my approach to my favorite bands is completely different than what is described here. Fun fact about me, sometimes to relax I really like watching some videos on various celebrities, and I watched some videos on One Direction and how the fans acted and how bands themselves acted, and I did remember One Direction over here. But this book is generally really great for a fan of any band, no matter the genre. But this book is more than just about being a fan of the band. It's also about dealing with life. I recommend this. This is one of my favorite books. Okay, here is a trilogy over here. Okay, technically I read the first book in January 2023, but I still decided to bring it to this video. So I put it aside for a while. I went to Italy and I bought the first book, and I tell you that had I not bought it in Italy because I couldn't find it everywhere in Tbilisi, in the UK edition I would not have bought the second and third installments, which is by the way, these were the only copies and they were cheap, so I got them. Yeah, these are definitely some of the best books that I read this year. This is the second and third books in the A Good Girl's Guide to Murder series by Holly Jackson. Here is the full trilogy, yeah! In many ways, the second book is really like the first one. How this is an investigation. This is Pip goes to investigate things for her friend and his family. I can say that this is a much more relaxed book compared to the first one. The first one was really thrilling. I think that's because nobody trusted Pip at the time, and she was only gaining trust, and here people do trust her. But this one, on the other hand, this one made me think, Holly Jackson, what is your browser history? Seriously, while reading this book, I kept wondering what in the world did she Google to write this. I am kinda a little bit sad that this book isn't an investigation fully like the first two books were. So the second half, the book changes direction completely, but it was still very thrilling. I do not recommend reading this book or finishing the book, the last pages, at night. You're going to have nightmares. Or at least I did. This is definitely the darkest and most shocking and most thrilling book in this series. But yeah, nonetheless, the trilogy is so much fun. I recommend checking it out. At least read the first book. And now come the two fantasy books over here. So, I was at Istanbul airport and I had the choice between Caraval by Stephanie Garber, which I really wanted by the way, and this book, and I chose this one. And I'm glad I did because it turned out to be one of my favorites and one of the best books of the year. And this is Vicious by V.E. Schwab. So this book set in two timelines, 10 years ago and the present day. 10 years ago, two talented young men, Victor and Ellie, attend a university and they try to have a near-death experience because near-death experience gives you superpowers. However, something in the way goes really wrong. They turn into rivals. And 10 years later, Victor escapes from prison and he wants to hunt down Ellie, while Ellie wants to hunt down every single extraordinary, aka people who had near-death experience and gained superpowers, and remove them. This is how he calls it. Yeah, he dehumanizes people with said powers and he removes them because he thinks they are a mistake. A very thrilling novel. It does switch back and forth between timelines, and not only 10 years ago, but also last night, a week ago, a year ago, and so on. Sure, the book is mostly about Victor and Ellie. This is about their story, it's about their past, but I also like that the book also focuses on their supporting characters. It shows their backstories and how and why they matter to Victor and Ellie and so on. Just couldn't put it down. And finally we have House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. Loved it instantly. This book is really comforting. I think it would have been a great animated film. I would love to watch it. Yeah, only 3 fantasy books gave me the feeling that I'm watching a solid adaptation. First is The First Law. I thought that I was watching a great HBO show. The second is the Stormlight Archive. I felt like I was watching something like Avatar The Last Airbender or Merlin. And the third one is this one. This would be a great cartoon. So this is a story about a social worker named Linus Baker who works for department in charge of magical youth. And one day he is sent to the orphanage where there are highly dangerous children, including the Antichrist, and Linus grows close to their ward, Arthur Parnassus. I can definitely say that Arthur is my favorite character in the book. He's definitely the best one here. Absolutely different approach to fantasy. You won't see some epic battles or some epic magic, no. This is simply a guy trying to do his best. And everyone else too. Oh, and also one more. Best book of 2024 so far. I finished it after I filmed this video, and so here it is, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire by J.K. Rowling. Yeah, when I read the book I did think of the film, and they cut so much from the film, so many details, and in many ways the book is better. I do think that the second task chapter was done very well in the film, even though the details were changed. Okay, so this book was one of my reading goals for 2024. Half year gone, half reading goals achieved already. Now let's move on to some short stories. Here I have The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. This edition contains 3 short stories by the author, and I really enjoyed the third one, The Old Water. It's about a guy who visits this family and he tries to get the daughter's attention. I thought it was really thrilling. And then we have some short stories by Shirley Jackson. Okay, I haven't read the titular Lottery. I'm reading this book really slowly. I pick up this book every time I want to read, but I have no energy for reading. Short stories really work well when you want to read, but you can't. And the short story I enjoyed most of all is the first one in this edition, The Intoxicated, about a guy who meets a 16-year-old girl and has a conversation with her, and she scares him more and more. And last night, well, today is 25th of June 2024, and last night I read the Charles After You, My Dear Alphonse, and I really liked. Yes, I have yet to reach the Lottery, so I'm familiar with the plot. In case you didn't know, The Lottery was the basis of one of South Park's episodes, and that episode had Britney Spears as the main star. It's a sort of an adaptation of The Lottery. Okay, now a few honorable mentions. The Courage to Be Disliked, Ishiro Kishimi and Fumitake Koga. I still struggle to pronounce these Japanese names. So this is a dialogue between the youth and the philosopher. The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. Okay, if I was recording this video a few months earlier, this would have been one of the best books of the year, but I read it really fast. However, now the hype in me around this book a little bit died down. Yeah, sure, the book was still very interesting. It's really fast-paced, very short chapters. This is definitely a plus. And finally, The Road by Cormac McCarthy. I have a reading vlog about the book. Feel free to check it out. But I can definitely say that I enjoyed the film much more. The film was better in many ways. I also decided to reread something because reading isn't about reading new stuff, but also about rereading some of the old stuff. And I reread all of the Scott Pilgrim graphic novels by Brian Lee O'Malley. I read all the novels in 2 or 3 days. These books are still fun. Yeah, if you want to get into graphic novels, definitely recommend Scott Pilgrim. These graphic novels are absolutely crazy, phenomenal, and they also break the fourth wall. Sometimes characters say something like, read the first volume or the second volume. Well, you got the point. And that's all. These are all the best books that I have read so far. And I really expect there's going to be more great books ahead. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. What are some of the best books that you read so far? Let me know down in the comments. See you next time. Goodbye.